Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. Today I am going to make butternut squash bread for you guys. And this is the last butternut squash from our garden. I think it's pretty much the nicest one we got that I didn't give away. So yeah, I'm looking forward to cutting this up. I'm going to cut it into basically 4 pieces. I'm going to save some of the seeds like I showed you in my other video because I want to be able to grow this again next year. And we're going to put that in the oven at 200 degrees Celsius until it's soft. I don't know, probably half an hour-ish, but just check it with a fork. If it's really soft, you're done. And meanwhile, I've got sourdough going as well. So if you haven't watched my video about sourdough bread, check that out. But that's basically, you know, my usual quote-unquote double-size batch. So that's 16 heaping spoonfuls of flour going in there with the sourdough. Looking pretty nice already. It's going to give a little bit more rise while this is cooking up. And then I will knead that into a bread, and I'll show you guys that step. And yeah, let's get to it. That is a beautiful color. I am just so happy with this. Seeds look really good too, so I'm sure I'll be able to save a few of these. That'll hopefully be, you know, ripe and mature. And yeah, so let's get to work. Okay, the butternut squash is all cooked up nice and neat now. It looks beautiful, orange. I definitely should have taken it a little bit sooner. It's a little bit burnt here, but you know, that's going to be no problem. I'll just scrape off a little bit of that from the top, and it's going to be great. I'll show you guys in a little bit. I'll scoop some out, what we're going to do with it. Okay, we are ready for the next steps. I got a bunch of the butternut squash scooped out here. I used roughly half of the squash, so basically most of the top half. Anyway, the sourdough is ready to go here, so you always want to save sourdough. If you haven't watched it yet, check out my you know, sourdough series of videos for the specifics. But anyway, I'm going to always save some, so I'm going to take 2 spoonfuls of the sourdough from here and put it in with some fresh flour, a little bit of water, throw that in the fridge. That'll be saved for the next time we make bread. And what I've got here is ground flax seeds and a bunch of salt. So I'm going to take the salt, the flax seeds, and the butternut squash. I'm going to put it in here and mix it up after I've taken my, you know, 2 spoonfuls out. So I'll show that to you in a second. Okay, so you can see everything's mixed up to a nice consistency now. It smells great, guys. The flax seeds and the butternut squash together are just like amazing. Each of them is kind of like a nice sweet, you know, aroma, but together it's just crazy. What I did is I dumped out 1 kilo of flour, so a whole little bag, put just a little crater in the middle, and then I scooped it all out here. I've got some water kind of over to the side here if I need it, but the butternut squash has actually got a lot of moisture in it, so as we start kneading this, you know, I'll probably have to add a little bit of water towards the end, but for the most part, I probably won't have to add very much at all. When you're just making like bread with just the flour and no butternut squash, you obviously are going to need more water. But I'll show you guys what kind of consistency you're looking for in the next step. Okay, so it's nice and kneaded into a ball now. You can see the consistency you're going for, which is kind of like just not quite sticking to my finger. It tries. You can see if I push it in a little bit, so it's sticking a little bit, but not super tacky. That's what you want. Maybe even a little bit softer would be fine too. Depends on how firm you like your bread. You're just going to let this sit, cover it with a light kitchen towel, and let it rise. You know, this can take anywhere from like an hour or more. It depends on how warm your conditions are. Yeah, so I'm just going to let it rise, and I'll show it to you when it's done. Okay, so the bread has risen nicely. You can see it's a lot bigger, and I'm going to knead this now. It's been about, I don't know, an hour 15 or so. I'm going to knead it again back into the little ball shape, let it sit for another, I don't know, 30-40 minutes, and then I'm going to show you the next step. Okay, so it's been about another half hour, but it's risen really nicely. You can see the bread is nice and fluffy, and you know, it's really kind of like filled with air. It's really quite nice. So what we're going to do is just knead it one more time, but this time what we're going to do is put it in kind of my version of a proofing basket, because I'm cheap and I don't have a real one, and you don't even need one. So what I do is I take this cloth, I put it in here, lay it out nicely. We're going to flour it up a little bit, and then I'm going to just knead this again, flour on the outside, and put it in there. And I'm going to show that to you guys in a second. And what you do after that is you just let it sit in this kind of proofing basket, they call it, so that it can rise. And I'm going to preheat the oven to 220 Celsius, and this is going to sit in here for like another good 15-20 minutes. You'll see it start rising, and yeah, I'll show it to you guys in a second. I'm not sure how much you can see it, but I do have a bunch of flour in there now, so that's what I meant. And this is just to help so that the bread doesn't stay stuck to the cloth or anything. It doesn't get stuck to the sides, and it'll be easy to turn it out. And I'll show this in a second after I've kneaded it and floured it going in the basket. So that's how it looks. Everything's floured up nicely. It won't stick. I'm going to just fold this over and let it sit for another 10 minutes or so. I'm going to start the oven at that point. And then by the time it's preheated to 220, this should be, nice and risen to the top. I'll show it to you guys. Okay, so the bread has now risen nicely. The oven's preheated. I've got a nice baking pan here, and what I've done is just sprinkled some, what do you call it? It's like farina. That's the name of it. It's just ground wheat. You could use cornmeal. This is just wheat meal basically. So you just sprinkle a little bit on so it doesn't stick. If you don't have any, don't worry about it. Just use a bunch of flour. Put it on kind of thick so that it doesn't stick at the end when you're trying to take your bread out. So now all I'm going to do is, I'm not going to be able to show you because I don't have a stand, but what I'll do is I'm going to pick this up and kind of just flip it out and, put it down this way on the pan. And then I'm going to take my trusty knife, try and get a sharp one, and just kind of cut across or some kind of shape into it, where the pressure will be released as the bread rises in the oven. You want the steam to be able to escape, otherwise it's going to crack and kind of go all wonky on you, but I'll show it to you in a second. So there's the bread, and now I'm just going to cut a nice little shape into it. I'm just going to go with basic, cut a cross shape into it, and maybe do a little bit, extra little cuts here on this side. But you can get fancy. My wife does some really nice shapes when she's making the bread. And anyway, so that's it. Now we're throwing it in the oven, and it's going to go for 30 minutes on 220 Celsius. Okay, so half an hour has gone by. I'm ready to take the bread out. What you need to have ready is something obviously to put it on so that it doesn't burn your counter. And you want to have a little mug of water and a brush. And I'm going to show you guys why in just a second. Alright, so you can see the bread has risen super well. It did crack a little bit on the side, but for the most part, it has gone straight up. So you can see just from the size of my hand. I mean, it's really tall, very nice. Now you're going to take your brush, dip it in the water here, and just brush the bread with the water. And you want it to go kind of everywhere and just brush it on. This really helps the crust get nice and kind of crispy and finished, and just adds a little bit of moisture back in as we're going to finish this baking process. Now the thing is, it looks quite done, but you do need to put this back in the oven. And I think if I remember right, a long time ago I had read that you really want pretty much the whole bread to reach at least, I think it's 200 degrees Celsius on the inside. So what we're going to do is drop the heat because we don't want it to get burnt, and put it back in for another half hour or so. This is pretty big bread, so I think it'll definitely need at least that much. I'll definitely check it when I take it out the second time. And what you want to do is just make sure that the whole thing is firm. You can see right here that this is not firm yet, so it's definitely not done. Just kind of brush it really well with the water, and then we are going to throw this back in. I'm going to reduce the heat down to around 200 or just a little over 200, and then I'm going to give it another 30 minutes, and I'll show you guys what it looks like at the end. Alright guys, the bread is done. I've taken it out, I've checked it, it's firm enough. Kind of when you're squeezing from top to bottom, if you feel that it's really squishy, it's probably not done and it needs a little bit more time. I think this is actually quite nice right now. You get some nice, golden edges here. Sorry for the lighting, it's a little poor. I will try and show it to you in a better light once it's cooled off and we're ready to slice it. Now, this is actually the hardest part when you're making your bread, is the fighting the urge to just slice into it and just eat the whole thing. You don't want to slice into hot bread. It will kind of get all like a weird texture unless you eat the whole thing. we've been known to do that at times, is to just eat the whole thing. But this is a really big bread, so obviously we're not going to want to do that. And yeah, I'll just let it cool. It'll probably take, you know, a good 2, 3, maybe more hours for it to cool off. I would say, you know, a good rule of thumb is let it sit for 3 or 4 hours before you go and cool it, before you go and cut into it. So yeah, I think like usually if I'm, you know, baking at night, I won't really cut it until the following morning. But yeah, you know, you can do what you want. And actually, I don't know if you guys can hear this, but I love this sound. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's kind of like crackling. I love this, like, I don't know, crispy crackling kind of sound that it makes. I'm not sure if it carries over through the mic, but yeah, we'll let this cool off and I'll show you guys what it looks like. It smells amazing. Yeah, I just, you know, I think like for anybody who likes bread, likes sourdough, like I said before, you know, the sweetness of the butternut squash combined with the sweetness of the flax seeds, this just makes for like one incredible taste. I've made this bread kind of before. The only difference there was I put in some oats as well when I was kneading the bread. I didn't do that this time, but I think it came out looking really good. We'll see how it tastes. And yeah, I'm excited to show it to you guys. Like I said, this is from our home grown squash, and you know, just grew out of our compost pile. Check out my videos on that if you haven't seen it. And yeah, hope to show you guys the slice in the next clip. Alright, so here's the bread cooled off and looking pretty nice. And it's getting ready to be cut. I'll show you guys a couple slices. Alright, so that's what it looks like on the inside. I can tell you the missus and I have just done a little taste test, and it's got her seal of approval. Came out great. You can see it's got a really nice, you know, light, you know, texture. It's really soft. It's got a good amount of air. The crumbs just really nice and you know, spread out. Firm, but not, you know, not like crazy. And yeah, sorry I don't have better lighting, but anyway, I hope you guys can see that. It's just, it's got a really nice crumb, incredible taste, really good flavor. I mean, obviously from the sourdough, but also from the butternut squash and the flax seeds. And yeah, you don't need a whole lot of ingredients to make some pretty special bread. I mean, Christmas is coming up, and I think this would stand really well, you know, almost as a dessert on its own. Throw some jam on here. You know, I have like the videos on how to make jam. I've made the Cornelian cherry dogwood jam. That would be great on this bread or anything else. Really, I think it's really like dessert quality. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and you know, make sure to subscribe if you did like that. Give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends, and thanks for watching, and thanks to all my new subscribers too. Really appreciate it, people signing up, and I will bring you the next one as soon as I can. Thanks. Bye.